Thank you, Jairaj, and thank you, Amarji, for your comments. I'm just going to be my usual pessimistic self, unfortunately. I have only doom and gloom to predict in this sense. So, technically, if you look at it, this whole decoupling starts off, this conversation about decoupling. It starts off in the West because technically, if you look at it, China only accounts for about 0.09% of inwards investment into the United States. And it accounts for only about 3% of inwards investment into the EU. If you look at the transatlantic trade, that is to say the US EU trade, that is approximately about $1.3 trillion a year. China's trade with both America and the EU combined would equal that amount. So basically what happens here is that in terms of trade flows, China is important to America, but in terms of investment, it is not that important to America. And this is where, the beginning of a Western decoupling from China starts. But where does the industrial and the manufacturing and the supply chain decoupling begin? Well, remember, the West is the technology supplier to China. Either it's legal technology supply, like setting up, Apple production factories and so on and so forth, or it is stolen technology, which China is extremely good at. The problem, of course, with Chinese technology is technology has two components, the how and the why. Now, China is very good at the how. The problem is they're not very good with the why. And unless you understand the first principles of that, these things seldom actually work, which is why you see China is at a much lower stage. Technically, if you were at the West, let's call it Occidentalia or Westosphere or whatever, you're looking at a combined economy of about $46 trillion, and a per capita income of around 44,000 US dollars per capita in the West, Westosphere. And by Westosphere, I of course include South Korea, Japan, Australia, and all these countries, Singapore, that are sort of part of this kind of a unified common market defense ecosystem and all of that. This doesn't happen with China. China is about $13 billion or so. Much lower per capita income and therefore much lower human value addition. And they are a middle income economy. They are going to be stuck being a middle income economy, which means they can't move up the production chain. So one of the things, the main decoupling you're going to see with the West is realistically going to be 3D printing and additive manufacturing. I think this week there was news of a motorized military boat, a very fast motorboat, constructed entirely by 3D printing. Imagine a military standard boat whose hull is constructed through 3D printing. Now, all of this is very good for the West, that the West can decouple, but how does this affect us? Remember, the nature of the Indian economy is very, very strange. We never actually had the manufacturing or industrial revolution. We moved directly from being a pre-industrial agrarian society into the services age without going through the manufacturing. So manufacturing capacity in India is extremely poor. There is also an anti-business environment when it comes to manufacturing or physical presence and things like that, which services manage to avoid quite smartly. You have labor laws and industrial laws that are against it and so on and so forth. Now, the problem is India's production is mostly extremely low level, much lower than China, much less competitive than China. So when 3D manufacturing actually starts the West China decoupling, the person going to be affected the most is going to be India, because it's going to be the smaller things, the easier to produce, the low value chain commodities that get replaced first. And then slowly, as the complexity of additive manufacturing goes up, where you're able to process multiple compounds and things like that, that is when China actually starts getting hurt. Now, when we talk of India decoupling from China, we have to bear this in mind, that when it goes step in step with a Western decoupling, it's going to get very, very, very bad for us till it starts getting better after a certain point of time, if it starts getting better at all. Now, what are the basic problems that you're looking at? Because the thing is, like I said, we have to move into the manufacturing age. Can you hear me? Okay, that's better. So what happens here is that you have several, even moving past 3D printing, we'll have to move towards a sort of middle manufacturing stage very, very quickly, in which case we can become a sort of substitute for China. Now, what we saw during COVID was that several companies moved out of China, but they didn't move into India. The overwhelming majority of them moved into Vietnam. And this is where you have the fundamental problems that prevented India from industrializing through the 50s and 60s are also going to be the things that prevent us from really moving up the value chain into middle level production. First, we've got an educational deficit. So, in India, we spend about $75 per student per capita. To even get to a factory floor manufacturing level, you need to be spending about 1,000 US dollars per student per capita. The amount required even to get to a factory floor production stage is approximately $650 billion a year. Today, we spend about $23 billion, $8 billion in the private sector, the rest in the public sector, and that 8 billion is concentrated to a very, very small upper crust sort of thing that can afford a really good education. The second problem, of course, is that in India, you don't have a state monopoly on violence. Riots are quite frequent. Law and order issues are extremely frequent. Just this week, we've seen what happened at the Wistron factory, the Apple manufacturer in Bangalore. The second issue is you have an extremely highly volatile law and order ecosystem, jurisprudence ecosystem. You have an enforcement deficit in past laws. You also have atrocious regulation. And you've seen this in terms of the Cairn arbitration which just came. Now, with the Cairn arbitration, it was clear as night and day that the Indian government was in the wrong. We still pursued it right up to arbitration. And now it seems that the arbitration is going to be rejected and it will be challenged in the Supreme Court. And we all know the way the Supreme Court comes down, the government will simply say supreme national interest. And that has always been the winning argument sort of thing. So all of this makes it very, very difficult for us to move into any kind of manufacturing. Now, why is this important? Because remember, for the West and China, the West is the main supplier of technology. It is also the main supplier of markets. When the technology goes, then the market access becomes precarious. In India, the problem is we are neither the supplier of technology to China, nor are we its biggest market, though we are a very big market. The second problem is the nature of India-China trade is extremely colonial. We export raw materials to China, but we import a whole host of finished products. And remember, the Indian market is extremely price sensitive. Now, when we moved from an agrarian economy to a services economy, most of our services are extremely price sensitive, and they are based entirely on Chinese price sensitive technology, which is to say cheap technology. I'm just being very diplomatic in that sense, but cheap crap, cheap Chinese crap. So what happens is you get rid of the cheap Chinese crap from your market, your services start taking a huge hit. Things, for example, ordinary services like Zomato and things like that. And many things we've been pioneers, like coming out home delivery, Zomato, wonderful. Other apps, great. The problem is all those markets then start shrinking. It becomes a huge problem Because remember, nobody can afford to buy Apple phones or high-end Samsung phones and things like that. Most of the market makes do with Lava and Huawei and Zolo and all those weird brands. So decoupling for India is an extremely precarious task. I would say to the point that it is almost impossible for us to do. And in fact, a Western decoupling from China will hurt us very, very, very hard. I mean, I don't even want to get into the social dimensions of it. They're horrendous, too horrendous to even contemplate. But I would say that the prospects are given, if ceteris paribus, if what is today continues, the regulatory environment, the investment environment, the nature of our economy, it is virtually impossible to do. Your basic dilemma in that sense is, how do you change the nature of the trade without having the necessary discipline or the willingness to absorb the pain of changing that nature of your economy? Thank you.